Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all. We hope you're all staying safe in these challenging times. We'd like to welcome you today to our discussion, where we'll share some of the challenges and solutions that NextEra faced and mitigated as they incorporated metrics and reporting within their transformation journey. My name is Miriam Sani, and I'm with the marketing team here at C-Prime. So we are very excited to welcome Roger Martinez from NextEra in sunny Florida. Roger is an Agile transformation and PMO manager. He has over 25 years experience successfully guiding organizations in defining and implementing new processes, models, and standards to improve quality, delivery timeframes, and alignment of investments with business goals to deliver optimized value to customers. Leveraging Agile, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, and his strong mentoring and leadership skills, he enthusiastically builds synergy and collaboration among teams to drive change and maximize value creation across enterprise environments. And welcome, Roger. Next, we welcome Alexander Eck in Iceland, senior product expert at Tempo. Previously, he served as customer success manager at Tempo, where he helped onboard customers and make sure they receive the tools and support needed to achieve their goals. He now provides technical guidance to ensure that best practices are implemented and value from the apps are maximized. Alexander plays a critical role in collaboration with Tempo partners to optimize integrative use cases. And welcome, Alexander. And last but not least, we welcome Brianna Hall, Senior Solutions Architect and Engagement Manager at C-Prime, and also located in sunny Florida. Brianna has almost 15 years experience as a scaled Agile implementation specialist and business strategist, leading large-scale Agile and lean development teams through all phases of a broad range of technology initiatives. At C-Prime, she works with our largest customers to identify needs, scope out and configure tools to assist in supporting product, program, and portfolio management. She is passionate about automating workflows to introduce efficiencies and allow teams to focus on the strategic. So welcome to all of you. And now that we know our speakers a little better, we'd like to find out a little bit more about your audience. And so we have a question for you. And we'd like to know simply, what role do you hold in your organization? Business C-suite, IT C-suite, business exec, IT exec, business director manager lead, IT director manager lead, team member, or other. So 35% of our audience are team members, 31% have indicated other, around 25% are IT directors, manager leads, 3% are business director manager leads, and about 6% are IT execs. So Roger, we have a nice range here.
Sounds like it.
All right, take it away.
Well, hello everyone, and first and foremost, before we start off, I wanted to thank C-Prime and Tempo for inviting me to present and tell our story and our journey as we've had it so far. And in that journey, we're going to talk about what we call the outcome-based agility model that we've kind of put together. And then in the end, we'll kind of sum it all up in the takeaways, and of course, do some Q&A after, and we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. Okay, so first, the basis. NextEra is a utility and an energy company, as most know, and our span of projects right now are right around 282 projects, and we can span from solar farms, wind farms, battery storage farms down to server commissioning and decommissioning and software implementation. And our team in particular is the infrastructure team that kind of puts all these things together. So we run a very high gambit and wide variety of projects that we do. So when we talk about doing an agile transformation, that was our first concern when talking about agile, is the kinds of projects that we have in our portfolio so far. So when we started this journey, it was a lot of blue tape. This blue tape is awesome to put on your walls. And we identified actually as Kanban, right? Kanban is the closest thing that we can get to in the simplified version that we thought would be a good first test run to see if any kind of agile methodology would work for us. And it actually did. It was a great basis for us. We lined up, of course, with our largest projects and most important projects, and even just a tactile version of it, of having the teams go in and move their cards and get used to moving it along these different statuses, and giving kind of a walkthrough and a stand-up per se, right, as we walk through them, was of great value to us to know if this was the right, journey for us. And just in doing so, we were able to see the benefits and establish the first long-lived Agile teams for us. We were able to visualize the work like we've not done before. We were managing the WIP, which was a new concept for us. We built training programs around it and trained everyone on Kanban and got the whole team trained. And I think this was the real basic foundation for our, JIRA implementation. It was a great thing for us. So with that said, before any kind of implementation, we got together and we established what our mission is going to be. And our mission was to establish a work and resource management system that adds value by providing increased engagement, transparency, visualization of work, and predictable delivery with actionable metrics, which is important, while limiting addition process or administrative work for the project management team or the team members themselves. We wanted this to be based in Agile and scaled Agile best practices, methodologies, and frameworks. So bottom line, more project work, less process work. We wanted to establish something that did not take away too much time from our teams to be working in the tools and in the process, rather than doing and concentrating on the project work itself. So then there was JIRA, and this was our first time actually being able to centralize everything into one place. But we decided first we had to kind of identify what our work was. How much work do we have? How big is it? How complex? So we built a Kanban system that was based off of 4 main criteria: our project priority category, duration, the financials, how large or small they were, and how many stakeholders. This was the extent of the visibility, complexity, and even the start of getting an idea of what our change management was going to have to be like to be able to roll these out. But we wanted to do it in a way that, again, did not add work. So after we kind of figured out that our priorities were just going to be numbered from 1 to 3, all according to the categories, and we tested it out with some of our larger and smaller projects, it ended up being very accurate for us. So we actually took it a step further in JIRA and made calculated fields where, according to what you pick in the different duration and financial fields, it gave you a score and then totaled that at the end. So we got a good data set to be able to see how many projects we have: small, medium, large, extra large, and so on. So with that goal achieved as far as, the JIRA Foundation, we found a centralized system. We had processes that we identified as far as Scrum, Kanban, and even a hybrid that we needed to establish for ourselves. But there was more alignment towards the transformation goals. We had more employee engagement into it. The basic project progress was reporting, that like some of the reports that you see on screen right now, we didn't even have that at one point. So this gave us good reporting and transparency into the projects. And with that transparency and visibility, we also were able to increase our accountability for the project teams, give empowerment to the project managers as far as decision making and being able to report out. And in reporting out, we used to have a lot of time building PowerPoint presentations on a weekly or biweekly basis to be able to show our progress, and that significantly decreased with these reports. Now, speaking of reports and employee engagement, we had a great amount of employee engagement. In fact, it almost became too much. as different teams were discovering JIRA, Confluence, the Power BI tools that go with us, all different kinds of dashboards and reports were coming out, which were great for the teams at a team level to be able to assess how they're doing and track their projects. But there was no real common data set or metrics or a set of metrics that we could say, okay, across the board, this is how we're doing. And we also found that there was no portfolio reporting or roll-up reports that we had or established. So we needed to find something that would bridge that gap. So at this point, we had already engaged C Prime and in some other things as far as coaching and helping us on our Agile journey in those aspects. But we needed help. We needed help identifying what tools were best for us to be able to get that portfolio and program view that we wanted to see. And so we engaged C Prime once again, but now with a team that was more towards our tooling, but yet knowing about the company and the transformation that we wanted to do. So with that, the next step would be, engaging them and assessing what are doing. So with that, I would like Brianna Hall to try to explain what their methods are.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. So when our team was engaged with Roger's team, the PMO had already done a significant amount of work, as Roger said, in terms of establishing their foundation within the tools. So just getting everybody to collaborate around a single shared source of truth for work is a big part of the process. So when we came in, we really wanted to be more of a collaborative partner to help Roger's team really realize the benefits of the tools that they were already had in place. So kind of our standard approach is we work with our clients to understand where they are. We want to plan out our goals, where we want to be, how we're going to get there, and then we iterate on that. So just as Roger said, in terms of tracking and managing the status and progress of their projects, we wanted to make sure we were offering the same value and the same measures in our work with the team. So in working with this team, we wanted to first understand and assess their use of the tools. So we took a deep dive into each and every one of their projects. And so as with NextEra, we see this in other clients as well. We had hundreds of different JIRA projects, dashboards, and reports. Teams were actively engaging, but there wasn't a sense of a single set of standards for how we're going to report or measure our progress. There were many different plugins and tools that we had available, but they were often underused. Teams didn't understand the full functionality available, or the integrations between particular plugins and tools weren't being utilized. And also something that is common is we see multiple different team operating models. So as is the case with NextEra, we have teams that are doing software development, but then we also have teams that are actually physically constructing these solar farms and things like that. So they have their own ways of tracking and managing work within JIRA. But we wanted to make sure we used what we had available to us. So use of these existing tools and data, make sure we're not changing the way that teams are doing their work, impacting their processes. So in many cases, we had zero to no impact to the teams or very few changes to configuration. We were able to use Power Scripts behind the scenes to automate some of our synchronization of fields so that we could report more accurately. And this helped enable us in general to define a standard for reporting that aggregates the project and project health without having to really change the way that teams are working. And one of the other keys to our success was the afternoon coffee breaks by Roger and team. Yes, so another poll question coming up, Miriam.
All right, and for our second poll, we'd like to find out a little bit more about the methodology that you're currently using within your organization. Pure waterfall, leaning toward waterfall, a hybrid, a combination, leaning toward agile, pure agile, or other. And if you indicated other, I would love a comment in the chat. We'll give everyone a couple of seconds. And I can tell you already that we're going to be almost across the board with a majority in the hybrid category, which I think is what we very often see with our customers. Yeah, so about 40% of our audience are using hybrid methodologies, 34% leaning toward Agile, 21% pure Agile, 2% pure waterfall, and then 6% indicated other. So yeah, I don't think this is very much of a surprise, Roger. Hybrid is what we typically see, and of course, all of them, trying to go edging towards the Agile whenever it's right for their teams.
Absolutely, and that's what we were kind of leaning towards as well. And it's hard to go pure Agile in some cases, right? It just doesn't work. But if you take the best practices of it and apply some of them to your everyday operations and project work, it may just work. It doesn't have to always be, at least in our case, following it. We take it as a guideline, right? It's a framework, it's a methodology. You take the best of each and you go with that. All right, so like we mentioned in the agenda, so this is kind of when we start going into really forming with C-Prime kind of helping us out with our tools and identifying and assessing how we're doing. We wanted to come up with a model which was outcome-based agility model. So just like the poll that we just took, it's more about the outcome and the results for us, right, than what the actual methodology. In other words, do we sacrifice some things just to be saying that we're agile or not, or do we focus on what outcomes we want, right? So, and do those best practices and apply things that just work for us. So this is the outcome-based agility model that we came up with. The next challenge for this outcome-based is not only agile, leaning towards agile and all that, but we, like most other companies, we're business case system, right? We are funded with business cases. It's not going away anytime soon for us. It works. So we're not replacing our funding by value streams, or by product. So this creates a divide in the approach to metrics. So because we're bound to the time and the estimated budgets, right? And at some levels, project levels and some levels, we want to be able to see one form of metrics that are agile, but because of the business cases, because of the financials that are tied and the timing and the scope of these things that need to be done by a specific time, then that creates a divide in our metrics and what we wanted to provide. So at the project level, of course, agile-centric reports that give you insight, like the sprint burn down, the velocity, the release roadmap, those were all fantastic at the project level, but we needed a program and portfolio level metrics and dashboard that could roll up so we can show progress, that we can show the current and forecasted financial health, and even our resource management. Are we over allocated? Are we just fine at capacity? So we needed a tool that would be able to kind of bridge these gaps. And we identified with C-Prime's help, Tempo Budgets, which uses an old kind of traditional method of progress and tracking, which is called earned value management, inside a new tool like Tempo Budgets. And for more of an explanation on earned value, Alexander is going to take us through that.
Yeah, thank you, Roger, and thanks to the C-Prime team for setting this up and dividing us to this really impressive demonstration of Roger and what is his use case, how he was basically what challenges he had to face and how he's going to solve it. So so I just wanted to jump in here for a second, a little bit to explain, or what is Roger going to explain here later on is solving his use case with earned value management. So a lot of people might not be familiar with earned value management. I very often say that earned value management is in very much nothing else than a sprint burn down chart, but it's working the other way around. So basically, you have a plan that you need to what you need to do, and you always estimate what you have delivered so far and compared what you have delivered versus what you have planned for. By doing all these, by measuring these two metrics, you can get a lot of out of your system. So earned value management is using these metrics, and from these metrics you get a lot of outcome KPIs or indices that you can work with. So for example, you can always measure what you have, if you have delivered more or less work than you have planned. You can give you can say if you have over or under budget with your financials, and when is your project likely to complete, how much work is remaining, what is the entire project likely to cost, and how much will be over or under budget at the end of the project. So these key figures are fundamental. So I know that this is a very hard to understand for a lot of people, but I always encourage people to look into this methodology and see how Roger and his organization has leveraged this methodology to get to an outcome and to get the information that they need to. So that is very fundamental. So I don't want to have it any further and send the word over to Roger and continue with his awesome presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. So, like Alexander was mentioning, it's kind of a hard concept if you don't know about earned value management, but really it's in its simplest form, you're comparing your scope versus your schedule. And the beauty of it, as now at this point, what we call now the C Prime Dream Team and my PMO Dream Team got together, and we came up with this and discovered that quickly it really doesn't matter what methodology we're using on the JIRA side. We can be using Scrum, we can use Kanban, we can be using hybrid, and even if you wanted to, in some cases, in construction and all that, would be for us waterfall, right? It doesn't matter. The scope is the scope. And that was a beautiful thing to see, where no matter what methodology and framework we chose to do, we were able to all use the same metrics to be able to gather how our progress was going, right, financially, and our progress as far as how the projects were doing. And it's different kinds of reporting. So this was now portfolio and progress. So we have not only earned value, but we've also got where we were able to, at that level, be able to do and see things at the product and value stream levels. So on one side, on the left-hand side, you see that you show growth portfolios, life cycle portfolios. We were able to group it in a way that we wanted to see it and still not affect our business case financial kind of side of things, right? And then we also broke it down even further. If you go into those, you can break it down into, well, for us, what kind of fuel type? Hey, how are we doing on solar? How are we doing on wind farms? And we were able to group them in that way, again, without affecting any other reporting and any other tools that the enterprise is using, down to the health of each individual site for us. So for us, we were able to translate where normally for maybe software development, this whole thing would be one big product, and each one of the individual sites at the bottom on the roadmap would be features or functions that you're releasing. For us, it was, well, a big wind solar farm or battery storage, and then the sites themselves were our progress. And then the aggregated view of how we're doing as a whole. So just a deeper dive, it's a tool that we were able to put in at a general ledger kind of level, right? Not to go into too much of the weeds as far as all the different line items in a project, because again, we didn't want to overload our resources with this kind of work. So we loaded it with kind of GL level financials, which gave us that health of how we're doing. It also gave us the ability to forecast through expected lifespan of the project or portfolio and how we're doing. This typically for us is really just what we call the alligator. If those lines are closer together as far as a forecast, the better we're doing, because, well, you don't want to see an alligator with his mouth open. So the more closed they are, the better it is. The open, we can understand quickly. So you don't have to understand all the intricacies of earned value, although it's great, to be able to understand the charts. And then finally, with those scripts, the power scripts that Brianna was mentioning, we did not want to have our teams and team members logging work and going into, because they're already logging work in another system. So instead, she was able to bridge the gap by taking our story points and converting them into the kind of original estimate and remaining estimate fields for Tempo budgets. So it bridged the two worlds, where now we can see how many are overloaded, what our capacity in hours are, and what our remaining capacity is. So right there is our first step, is resource management and seeing how we're doing as far as the teams are concerned. So this is just another view of it. As you go in and dive deeper, those power scripts that were made gives you this kind of a staff workload report. It's basically the hours available versus the assigned workload. And the top line would be the remaining availability, the assigned, and obviously we have a problem there because we're 113 hours over capacity. And it goes further by being able to tell you, hey, these are the 16 issues, there's 1 at risk, and 10 are overdue. So in one view, we can see how we're doing and what we need to kind of address quickly. The other thing that we liked about this is, if you look at, we do have the names and they're blurred out here, but by role, we have contingent workforce and we have employees. And usually the contingent workforce is just a line item for us, right? But those contingent workers are resources and they have different skill sets. So we wanted to have a listing of what kind of skill sets and an inventory of what skill sets we have as a whole. And this was able to give us that as well. So now we jump in. This is another tool that isn't Tempo that the Dream Team at C Prime identified for us. This was Tempo Teams, and we use it at a project level. Again, we're not logging time. It's actually worked very nicely by having the project managers being able to kind of go in one time and plan out what their resources are going to be working on for a given amount of time. And this gives us that overview of where people are over allocated. If there's an emergency, if there's something that they're taken out of, that is also put into the tool. So we're able to see when individuals are over allocated, and we're able to see the overall, which at this point, even if it's a separate tool, it's still in Tempo and it correlates with the same data that is going into the Tempo budgets tool. So you're comparing your capacity versus your utilization and getting a percentage of utilization from it. And you can address that and drill down and see, who needs to help and who needs more work. And this is the view of it. And this is my team. And as a PMO as a service, which basically means we centralized everything through the governance of the PMO, and we help. We help you set up, we help you with the configuration of your tools, and so on. So we work with the project managers to be able to make sure that the right information is in the tool and it's always being addressed and up to date. That way we don't lose it by, being just one team accountable for their things and no outside governance to be able to help them when, they're working on a project and they're too busy and they forgot. I mean, it happens. So our team goes in there and makes sure that things are being up to date and accurate as possible. And the way that we built it was each project has a respective team in the system. The teams are grouped into programs, and then assignments are done at the project level only. So we don't ask anyone to go in and put in their time once again, or estimate their time of what they're doing in each task. And so there's a couple things here that we also discovered. We discovered EasyBI is a great tool for those roll-ups that you want to be able to see that perhaps the tools don't have, whether it be the Tempo budgets, JIRA, whatever in the suite that you're using. You can identify some things that the data is there, and it's just there to be able to roll things up in the way that you want to see it. So we coordinate things in the same way where the PMO team gets together with the project managers and their teams. And then what we do is we built these overall kind of views where we know how many resources we've got, what's the availability, and what our capacity is overall. Because these are now reports that are not project level reports. We're trying to now give those reports that are at a higher level that if you want to, you can drill down, but it gives that level these actionable items to be able to go on and say, hey, I want you to address the 17 people that are over 100% allocated, right? So it gives them that kind of view. And it also gives the project view, it gives our department, my boss, Manny Vasquez, it gives him the data to be able to say, hey guys, here's the data behind it. We're just not talking. Here's actual data and reports that show we're over allocated and we need to do something about it, whether it be more funds or more resources. This one is really fun. So we were also provided the tools, a tool that's called Structure. And this Structure tool is very versatile, but very consumable by your customers. In other words, anyone that wants to see it can kind of understand what's going on, and you can structure it in that way. The C Prime team helped us with this as well in some of the things that we wanted to see, and thankfully every time that I asked Brianna something, she would only say yes to me. I think it was the coffee that I was giving her. I got her addicted to it. So this, for example, is a structure that shows, hey, we need to track not one release and the progress of them, but 2 releases. So the progress bars that you see, this is a completed project, obviously, but at one point, it hands off. So the QA progress would get to 100, then it would jump to CRO progress, and we would track that as well over to the due date. So it gave us a view that we had not seen before, but really a powerful amount of detail in a small little dashboard. In some cases, for example, in this one, we want to see also the time that things have been in progress. And obviously, when you set a project up, it could take some time between the original configuration and when it starts, but this is a drill down that shows, okay, well, we start with initiative and then go down to the epics that we want to track or the milestones, down to the stories and the tasks that we need to do. Now, there's a handoff here. One is the time and status in to do and just sitting in kind of that backlog status. And then there's a status that's in progress. So we take it as we're measuring 2 things, the time elapsed, which is our time in status plus the time in progress, right? But we can see and address, hey, this has been in here for quite a while. And now when it goes over the time in progress, it's the time actually being worked on. So you got time elapsed, the actual time, and then your progress even in completed stories. So it was a nice little mixture of different things to be able to kind of see our progress in that way and use an indicator in that way. This one was a fun one. This is a structure that is showing not only our WIP level, so we were able to configure a formula that would standardize our WIP level and say, okay, anything that's over 5, for example, that are in progress, I want to see which who the team members are that are over their WIP levels. So if you see a green check mark, they're fine, they're under 5. If you see a caution sign, that's where we would go into and dig a little deeper to see why there's more things in progress, to control that WIP level, and also the overdue flag. So there's a little flag that comes out anytime that something is overdue, the due date that has been placed on it. So in one shot, again, this project manager can take a real quick glimpse and see what they need to address and actionable items that they need to do real quick. So this is truly the challenge. So my boss, Manny Vasquez, he came up with a great idea. It is telling a story, and I love this idea. Throughout, we have all these different project reports, we have all these different kinds of things going on, but how do we tell in a glimpse, in one thing, a story that spans all of our portfolios, all our programs, and tells a story of how we're doing? So this encompasses, this is a dashboard that we created in JIRA, and JIRA is able to pull in, for example, the things from Tempo budgets, things from Tempo teams, from EasyBI. So this is an overall story, and in this particular case, it's a story of how the pandemic has affected us. So if you see at the top row, there's an average of maybe 30 days behind, with one being our construction portfolio that's a little bit more, but if you average them out, it's about 37 days behind as a whole. Then our time and status. The things that are in to do are now way up there and waiting to be taken care of because of this delay. But as time progresses, we start getting back into the swing of things and completing things. And our stories now start getting completed, and in May, we're kind of back to normal. The cumulative flow shows that same thing, but now our done starts to grow. So as our to-do starts to come down, our done in the cumulative flow starts to go up. Less things in progress, which is our WIP levels. And then we have that overall view of blockers, risks, impediments throughout the department and throughout all of our projects, and you're able to identify. So our blockers go up, our impediments go up, mainly due to resource constraints, right, because of the pandemic. WIP levels, it shows how much percentage are within the green and how many are still over their WIP levels, where we can address that. And then we've got the volatility, which is pretty much the way that you measure what the differences are, right, of how much span you have in your velocity. But and this slide will show, and it's going to be distributed, so you can dig a little bit more into that. But we've got our average velocity, we've got our completion or predictability, our volatility, and our standard deviation all in one. That covers all three methodologies that we currently have, right? Is Scrum, Kanban, and the hybrid version that we have. So this was a nice challenge to have, where now in one shot we can see everything that is happening with our whole department and our whole portfolio as a whole that anyone can access. No PowerPoint needed. They can just access it to the dashboard and see the story. Overall, we were able to complete a centralized reporting system as a foundation. We have reporting by portfolio, aggregated portfolio health, breakdown of portfolio into programs wherever we needed it, drill down into individual sites and projects, more transparency into our project data, increased accountability for project teams, better control over project and project managers, and definitely decrease in time and spending for creating these reports. And in resource management, that foundation of over-allocation, how much capacity do we have, utilization, the difference between the two, the breakdown of the utilization at a higher level, team level reporting, and resource level reporting as well. We were able to make a nice suite of portfolio reporting and resources, still using a methodology that we needed to use at the project level. And this, I think, is where Brianna comes in and kind of brings it all together for you.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully tie all this up in a nice bow for you. So some of the takeaways we wanted to share with you, we felt that Roger's story was would hopefully resonate with many of you, because this is something we see with a lot of our clients. You know, a lot of teams are using JIRA and the Atlassian tools and add-ons in different ways, but, you know, may think or feel that they can't report or aggregate at scale, that they can't use these tools for higher level reporting. So we wanted to show that it's absolutely possible to do that. Now, it does require some additional add-ons and plugins and understanding of how to use those, but JIRA is very, very capable of providing that sort of reporting. Some of the other things that we see commonly is that, you know, we have teams that are working within Agile methodologies at various levels of maturity, but then we have executive leadership asking for more traditional metrics. And so a lot of folks feel that they don't understand how they can bridge that gap. So this is, you know, one way that we've seen, you know, NextEra successfully bridge that gap. And something else that's very important is that project health is more than just the story points completed. So it's more than just, you know, how many stories are we completing every sprint? What is my team's velocity? The overall health of the project needs to incorporate other factors such as the schedule, the finances. So we want to make sure that we have that complete picture. And then that leads me to the next one, which is measuring the right thing is as important as measuring things right. So we can get a high level of accuracy and all the data in the world, but if we're not measuring the right things to help us in our decision making, then we're going to miss the mark. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're keeping the bigger picture in mind. So it's very common that we see, like Roger's teams did, as users start using the tools, they start building all of these reports and dashboards. But having more you know, data isn't always better. If we can aggregate, if we can simplify, if we can give, you know, paint a good picture, tell a good story, the simpler the better. That's going to help us really provide the right information and the insight. So rather than providing more detail, if we can synthesize and aggregate and roll up, that'll help us understand the higher level of where we are. So with that, Miriam, if you'd like to kind of close us out and wrap up some of our final pieces here.
Absolutely, and then we'll get to Q&A. We already have quite a few lined up. So, you know, keep the conversation going. You can connect directly on LinkedIn with Roger, Alexander, and Brianna. And then check out, you know, C-Prime upcoming webinars, read our blog, download our white papers, case studies. And we'll also be sending you in our email follow-up. We'll send you some additional resources that would be of interest to you based on your interest here. And then share with us what topics you're interested in. Ask us questions or give us feedback directly at learn@cprime.com. And one very easy way for you to engage in conversation with us, follow us on social media. We'd love to hear from you, and you can keep updated on our thought leadership events and more on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All right, so let's go to questions. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. Thank you so much for all of your engagement. It's wonderful to see. So Alexander, the first question is going to go to you. Andrew asks, how much time investment, you know, are we talking about in order to, you know, reach these levels of metrics and reporting as far as the integration goes for, you know, for a basic project from the standpoint of template?
That's of course a very good question. Very difficult to answer that question. But I also see here a lot of questions also related in that to that topic in regards to the confidence in the data that we see. So first, of course, it is difficult to understand the metrics that you see on the screen and that you can develop within Tempo or JIRA. And as probably also, yeah, Roger knows, or maybe he can tell his story. He is probably one of the persons who needed to understand these and to find out the right fit for that. So Tempo Budgets has very generally very many methods to offer how to configure and set up Tempo Budgets. So you can always find the way in order to set that up probably, in order to really to get the forecast information that you need and that fits your needs, because the use case that Roger here might fit his needs, but his configuration might not fit your needs. So it is very valuable and yeah, maybe difficult to understand, but it's difficult to answer. Maybe Roger, you can add something to the discussion.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I would say there's two options there as a whole, right? Because I heard that there's a lot of similar questions. First is if you've identified, right, tempo budgets or the tempo suite is something that is good for you, then the harder part and the most time consuming is configuration and getting to know the tools and all their functionalities. So I would say if you go it alone, then that's going to take you a little while of iterations, right? You're going to go through iterations of discovering what the tools do, how they do it, and how you're going to be able to kind of custom fit it to your company and your needs. Now, we didn't kind of choose to go that way. We went towards C-Prime, and I was lucky enough to have their team where, I would just barrage them with questions, honestly, and what the capabilities are and what we do and all these customizations that we wanted. And I would get my answers a lot faster, and the configuration went a lot smoother for us because we had and still have 200 and plus projects that we wanted to onboard, and we couldn't wait too long between onboarding each project and each team, so we wanted to kind of speed that up. So C-Prime helped us with that. Now, with that said, anyone that wants to know a timing for us, we got it to the tempo budgets piece to the point that we wanted it right around the, I would say, 5 to 6 month mark is where we saw that the tempo budgets was working the way that we wanted it configured the way that we wanted it. And that includes having all our projects, in there and ready to go.
Okay, great, thank you. And then we have a question from Sydney, and I think, Roger, you just mentioned that you had 200 projects, if that is the number that I heard right. So yep. Sydney's asking how many teams that you have involved in this particular initiative, and then a follow-up question that I would have is, what would you say would be a good threshold to look into this type of metrics and reporting?
Well, so as far as there's, and you can clarify for me, but as far as teams that are involved, it was kind of cool because it was my team as far as a PMO team, not very large. There's maybe 10 of us and maybe 5 as a core team, and us engaged with C-Prime, which at one point was about 4. We were able to do the configuration with a small team, but then affect in a large way by being able to do trainings in larger sessions. And then, for example, the ones that you saw that were by fuel type and, different kinds of portfolios, we would kind of gather those portfolios and those program teams together and train them as we went. We're talking about, as far as teams that are handling these projects, we've got about maybe 30, 40 teams that are handling several projects at the same time. But that training became very intricate, very important for us to be able to get everyone on board and trained as quickly as possible and on the same page.
Okay, nice. Hope that answers the question. And then I have a question from Wes, which I think is a very valuable question, and it's something that I've heard personally from other customers. So Wes asked, how do you understand the value of monitoring WIP, and how do you convince upper management to care?
Oh wow, that is a great question. So in a nutshell, we were able to do it first with the data, right, and understanding what WIP really is and explaining it, but in its essence, with the data and the reporting, if you explain to someone that it's just common sense in some ways. If you're explaining with the data, saying, hey, these people are over or have 10 things in progress, for example, there's no way that 10 things can be worked at the same time. It's more explaining it in common sense than to go into the kind of explanations of in any kind of other, scaled agile or agile kind of method that they explain it. That really doesn't translate. At least in our world, it didn't translate. So it's really getting down to the simplified version of it and saying, listen, here's the data. These people cannot be possibly working on 10 things at the same time? And if they are, what would you prefer? Would you prefer them to move the needle 1%, 10 times? Or would you like them to move the needle, 50% and, a couple times? So it's, these projects that are moving along at a scale, at a snail's pace, if you just take that away and show them that you can make faster progress on a couple of them and then move on to the next, it is a challenge, but it's doable.
Yeah, and Roger, I'll add to that. Something we commonly see is that for those teams that do start managing and tracking their work in progress, some of those other metrics you showed, like the time and status, you'll start to see those metrics go down. So as you start limiting the amount of work your teams have in progress, that overall time to completion should go down significantly.
Okay, great. Our next question comes from Ashish, and I'm going to send it to both Roger and Brianna. So Ashish says that their team is looking to implement something similar, and he's asking, what are some of the things that, Roger, from your perspective, that they can bring up to their higher-ups, from a value perspective? And then Brianna, what are some of the steps that the first steps that you would recommend them doing, in terms of, setting up something like this from a platform perspective?
So the first things to identify that I think are important is, what do they want to see? That's something that we think of, for example, a lot of times at the project level, what we need to do to move the progress and do the resource management and all that. But what is it that is good for them? What do they want to see as far as movement? And they don't want to see drill down of each resource or the progress or the tasks. They want to see metrics like, what are you going to finish, due dates, things like that, which, by the way, Tempo budgets will also help you with the unplanned work as well, and putting a placeholder for that. But it's important to identify what they want in a roll-up kind of sense. It's most likely going to include your financial health, the progress of the project itself, and then show them the complexity as well of what the things are you're working on. One of the easiest or fastest wins that we got was our intake process, where it shows, how many projects we have, and in the different sizes of the projects and what's involved with them, because it's one place that they usually didn't see a big snapshot of how many projects are really going on.
Yeah, so for the second piece of that, in terms of the implementation on the technical side, as is true with any reporting, it's only as good as the data behind it. So while we do our best to mitigate the impact to the teams, there does have to be some level of, consistency among certain pieces of our data. We have to come to a consensus as an organization about how we're measuring and managing our estimation. So that's something we want to make sure all teams are doing in a similar fashion. So either everybody's using story points or everybody's using hours. We also want to make sure that we have some consensus around what progress means to us. Is progress a measure of story points completed? Is it a measure of stories completed? Is it a measure of value delivered? So what do we mean when we say progress? Beyond that, there's other data hygiene practices we want to make sure that are in place. If we are tracking against due dates, that's done kind of consistently, that we have the data underlying to support the kinds of reporting that we're looking for. Now, this doesn't mean that every single team has to use the exact same workflow and screens and fields. We can certainly allow and accommodate differences among teams, but there are going to be some key indicators that are vital to our reporting that we want to make sure are consistent.
Okay, great. And we are running out of time, but Roger, I'd like to throw this last question out to you from Jonathan. And again, this is something that, we see on the customer side. We see a trend moving toward that. And at CPROM, we talk about, moving from project to product. So he asked, how did you manage to transition from project department teams to more long-lived teams? As in his mind, this is one of the hardest success criteria to secure, and a lot of organizations struggle with that as well.
It is, and it's a very common thing. We still struggle in some ways with it, because we, like every other company that's out there, you would love to dedicate 100%, of your people to one project. but sometimes that's just not possible, right? But what we did do to establish those long-lived teams is again, we were lucky enough to be able to back things up with the data and just show our progress. So where we ourselves decided, okay, let's put this other project a little bit on the back burner and then concentrate fully on one. That was able to give us data to be able to show people, hey, this is of value, right? And the long-lived teams is something that came along with it. We wanted to establish teams that we found what their skills are and what the right type of projects we assign to them. Always keeping in mind that we don't want them to always just get bored on the same kind of projects, but we mix it up every once in a while. But we identified those teams and were able to still continue to give them the projects and feed them projects that we knew they were going to be successful in as a team. And in that progress, the increased productivity that we got from those teams spoke volumes to the higher ups as far as what, to be able to duplicate this, because you don't start with everyone as a long-lived team. You have like your proof of concept with one or two, and then you show the data, and then grow from there.
All right, wonderful. So we've come to the end of our time together. I'd like to thank our speakers, Roger, Alexandra, and Brianna, for sharing how NextEra met some of the metrics and reporting challenges with Tempo and PowerScripts and all the great things that they implemented as they brought their organization on really a journey to bring value to their customers better and with more efficiency. And of course, we'd like to thank you very much, our audience, for taking time out of your busy days to come and learn with us. We hope you got value out of some of the content. We hope to see you very shortly in one of our upcoming webinars. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.